Welcome to Free Burn. This is Matt Ballard, your host. This is the podcast where we talk all things mental and behavioral health in the first responder community. Real life firefighters, police officers, EMTs and paramedics, clinicians, and doctors. It's time we have the real conversation and burn the stigma behind first responder mental health, one podcast at a time. Welcome back, folks. This is Matt Ballard, Free Burn 2023, your host. Today, we're going to sit down with Destiny Morris. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist in California who specializes in first responders and their families. She is trained in EMDR as well as first responder counselor certified. Destiny sees individuals, couples, and holds a weekly therapy group for first responder partners. And it's early in California.
It is 8 a.m. Well, really, it's not that early.
Yeah, it's really not. Well, hey, thank you for coming on. Been looking forward to this one. I think we connected a while back and got you scheduled up to come on and share some of your expertise for sure. So
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah. So, you covered quite a bit in the intro. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialize in first responders and their families. I see couples, I see individuals, and then I also do the group that you were talking about or mentioned for partners of first responders. So my job is really to support people that are in this first responder field. I have some personal experience in it, and then I also have clinical experience, and that's kind of what makes me culturally competent to be able to work with this population.
Okay. So you want to share any personal stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So grew up with my dad being a cop,
Okay.
daughter of a police officer. And then when I was in grad school becoming a therapist, I was in a relationship with a fireman. So I was in that relationship for a few years. That's what started my interest. I worked in a psychiatric hospital during my internship time, and I would see a lot of first responders who would get admitted to the psych ward for either detox for substance abuse or psychiatric breaks, anything along those lines. And it was heartbreaking to me to see them treated like everybody else and get thrown into like the general population of psych ward. And I realized in that moment that there needed to be more space for first responders to go and be understood and treated appropriately. So I've had the experience of being a partner of a first responder, a daughter of a first responder, and then clinically, I'm trained in EMDR, which is a type of therapy we use to really piece out and process trauma. It's the most gentle way to process trauma. And then I'm also first responder counselor certified through a program. So all of that to say, I am very well versed in the first responder world, and I've worked with basically nothing but first responders and their families for the past 3.5 years.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Thank you. I love it. They're my people.
Yeah. I mean, you're the type of counselor that we need, right? Vetted counselors that know know the culture, know what we're about and kind of the stuff that we go through and everything else. So
yeah, thank you. I hear a lot of horror stories. I'm sure you do too.
Oh yeah.
I actually was just ranting about it this week. I had a client say that they got a new therapist into their department, and the department said, "Hey, you got someone for a ride along. She's going to be the new therapist or psychologist or whatever for the department." So the guys are all asking her questions, what made you want to work with first responders? Like, what do you know about firemen? And she said, "Oh, I don't know. I mean, I know you guys go to fires." And then I guess that they went to a call, and it was like a stabbing, and the person had died right there on the scene, and they arrived and kind of, checked it out. And then, AMR came and did their thing. And when they left and went back to the department or the station, the therapist said, don't you guys need to debrief about that? And all the firemen looked at each other like, that's not something we debrief about. We weren't hands on. We came and she was dead. So things like that really cringe me. Also hearing about therapists who want to join this, I don't even know what they think it is, an elite club. They want to get into the circle of first responders for their own personal gain. because
Yeah.
once a first responder knows that you're culturally competent, obviously you're going in guarded, but also you're like, okay, this person's going to understand me. And when they don't understand you, or they seem to be bothered by details of calls you're talking about, or they tell you, whoa, that's really a lot, or whoa, why aren't you getting more sleep?
Yeah.
Things like that are really crucial to the first responder culture,
Yep.
that can deter so many people from getting the help that they need. And that right there is like my biggest ick, pet peeve, bother when it comes to therapy in the first responder field.
Yeah. It's just different for us. I mean, you know that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, probably, so I don't know, like, I'm not a therapist, obviously, but I don't know what they talk to you all about in school. Does it go through any part of like first responders, anything like that?
No,
Nothing.
we know trauma as an umbrella is a big one in school. But again, we're taught in grad school, at least for California. I mean, I've been in school for like 10 years. So a lot of school. It's a lot of work. You have to do 3,000 hours and take a big licensing exam in order to get licensed. So
Yeah.
I don't want to discredit the work, but when it comes to the first responder stuff, that's not mentioned. Trauma is grazed over usually. Very everything is kind of like up to you to get more experience on, hands-on, and more training on your own outside of the schooling that you do.
Yeah. So what's different? Like, you talk about trauma. What's different from first responder to just the general public having trauma? What's the difference there that you've seen?
There's similarities and differences, right? So huge differences, right? You guys have something, and I'm going to use you guys. I don't hope that doesn't offend it. I don't want to put everyone in the box, but first responders tend to have something called compiled trauma. It's not, sometimes it's one call or two call, but a lot of times when I'm seeing a first responder, it is call after call after call after call. And unfortunately, I get the first responder who's been in the field for 20 plus years and is like, I'm not okay right now, and I'm not sure why. And we have to go back through all those calls. So that's a big thing that first responders, I think, tend to have as far as trauma goes. Also, you are conditioned to see traumatic things all day long, over and over and over. And that's part of that compiled trauma that's happening. But that's something that the general population does not see. If I get someone in the general population for trauma that wants to see me, they might have had a car accident or something, right? Once in a lifetime kind of situation or childhood stuff. Yeah. You guys are seeing so much of it in such a short amount of time that it makes it a complex trauma, definitely.
Yeah. That cumulative effect of just constantly being on that line and seeing that stuff. So yeah. That's it. 100%. I agree. And I'm not even a counselor, and I agree with that.
Yeah. Been there. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's other differences too, as far as like huge differences on how I would treat a first responder versus someone in the general population coming to me for trauma. Very different. A lot of different tactics. First responders tend to be more private. I like to say that I specialize in men that don't like therapy. That's kind of my comfort spot, which is an uncomfortable place for a lot of therapists to be, but that tends to be my jam. I love the crunchy kind of crabby, don't want to be here, my wife contacted you for me kind of clients. Those are my favorite, and I kid you not, those are the ones I end up the closest to at the end of our time.
Yeah, that was me. It was like, if you would have told me, 5 or 10 years ago that I'm going to be going to therapy and talking to this counselor, I'd have said, not me. It's not going to happen, But it brought me to that point, and we're very guarded anyway especially when it comes to, the stuff that we see and the stuff that we do. So,
you have to be, right? I mean, I think of too, kind of jumping over to family life. When I'm going to use male and female, so whoever's listening apply as needed. If you're the female first responder, flip it around. Just generalizing here, but for you, if your wife is not a first responder and you're the first responder, you don't usually or typically come home and be like, oh my gosh, let me tell you about all these critical incidents and all this stuff that happens. You learn how to decompress on your own or with your colleagues or whatever, so that by the time you get into your door, you can be husband, dad, whatever your other roles are. So you are constantly telling your brain over and over and over, we don't talk about these things.
Mm-mm.
So when you get into therapy and I'm like, okay, let's talk about these calls, you're like, I've been doing 20 years of let's not talk about these calls. So that's not the easiest thing to jump right into. I get
Yep.
a lot of first responders that say, I don't even know where to start,
Mm-hmm.
which is normal.
My therapist had me do a trauma timeline, you know,
Wow. I like that.
and
Like write it out.
yes, it was like probably one of the hardest things that I've had to do in a long time. Just to
Yeah. How
kind of
long did that take?
a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're
Yeah.
talking at the time, it was 17, 18 years, 19 years worth of, everything that I could remember from my childhood all the way through. And that's when we kind of started tackling the EMDR sessions and going back and just taking piece by piece and started doing EMDR on them. And some sessions lasted, a couple sessions, and some of them wasn't very long, just processing everything that I could, And there was a lot of EMDR sessions, I can say that. But
Did you like EMDR?
loved it. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep. It was
That's
very
awesome.
weird at first because I just didn't really understand it. She
Yeah.
explained the best she could, but it was weird because it was something I've never done before. And I'd heard stories about it and stuff. So, but once I started doing it and processing the information and saw the effect that it was having on me, and not that those things ever go away, right? It helps me lessen them a little bit more. Those traumas that I've had throughout my tenure or through my life, and very effective for me. So
Oh, I love
I
it.
highly recommend it to anybody that we're helping out through our peer team or whatever. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, EMDR is a really powerful tool. I use it a lot with first responders when it comes to traumatic calls and things like that. Yeah, the whole goal of EMDR, unfortunately, I can't wipe anyone's memory. That would be
No.
ideal, right? If
Yeah.
I could be like, okay, let's just wave the wand and it's gone. I can't make you forget it, but what EMDR does is it takes something you've stored as trauma in your brain or multiple things, and we're taking it off of a shelf, we're processing it, and then we're putting it back on a shelf that is labeled not trauma in your brain, just normal, we've processed. And it also, the goal is to be able to think about that incident or hear about that incident and it not have negative feelings
Yep.
or dreams or anxiety tied to it. It's just one of
Mhm.
those things like, yep, I went through that and I've moved forward. It's
Yep.
a processed feeling. Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
Mhm.
Very effective.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that you did that. That's great.
Yeah. I've done, I still do it sometimes. If something happens and I still need an EMDR session, then we'll talk about it and then we'll do some EMDR work on it and move on. It's a great tool to be able to access and use for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
So, let's talk a little bit about families, like what you do for families. And I know that's your gig for sure too. So
Yeah.
let's break into that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see couples. That's a big one. I see quite a few individuals. I would say that most of my practice is probably individuals, whether it be just a husband or just a wife, and then we'll have their spouse join us sporadically to kind of touch base. And it's helpful for me to get someone else's perspective on that person outside of what they sit and tell me. I also see children of first responders. So as far as children goes, I see teenagers. I don't see anyone any younger than 13. That's usually my cutoff point, 13, 14. And I've had quite a few buyer, children of that product of that as well. Yeah. Yeah. And then
So
I have
what
my
kind
group.
of what is like, what do you think the most common thing is like for, say, wives and kids of first
Ooh.
responders?
Okay. I'm going to separate them.
Yes.
Because they're not the same. So wives is the whole reason I created my group.
Okay.
Because I tend to see this spectrum. It's really interesting. And I don't know if you've seen it, where in wives or the spouse can kind of swing back and forth between these two things. So one end is extremely anxious, um, really nervous when their partner's gone on fires, nervous when they're gone, kind of feels like their life needs to go on hold and then resumes when their partner comes home. So there's those category. The other side is hyper independent. I see this more with the fire wives that have been around for a while, where they're like, I don't need my husband. I can do it all by myself. And when their husband comes home, they really, really struggle to give up that control or share pieces of that. And it can cause the first responder to feel like an outsider in their own family. So those are the far spectrums. And throughout seasons of this lifestyle and this culture, I see a lot of firewives really swing back and forth between those. And it's hard to stay at that in between healthy. I can do things by myself, and I'm able to, and I'm independent because I'm not anxious. But also when my husband comes home, I'm able to transition back into accepting the help. And that was really, I guess, the core of why I wanted to create my first responder partner group, just for the wives to have that support and understanding.
Yeah. So do you offer that? I mean, is it like just for people in California, or who is it open to? Just for California?
Yeah, just California. That's where my license is. Yeah.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to connect with other clinicians right now so that I can be not just someone that takes in clients, but also someone that sends out clients to culturally competent therapists, because I know that's a really hard thing to find. So
Yeah, it really is.
if anyone's listening, they're not in California and that sounds interesting, send me a message and I will try my best to connect you with someone in your area, because that's important.
Yeah, that's something that I'm trying to tap a little more into, is the family side of things, the wives and the husbands, or whatever, vice versa, whatever, and the kids. Because I know it has an effect on them, especially when they see a loved one going through the things that that we deal with. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I see so much. I mean, that it's such a broad way to introduce it, but with wives, I mean, I can just kind of give you a run through of what we talk about in the groups.
Sure.
Process groups. So people bring in the stuff they're dealing with, just like normal therapy, but it's in a group setting. And they're very small groups. They're no bigger than 5 usually. And what we'll talk about is communication. That's a huge one. Anxiety, how to cope with it, how to separate yourself from your first responder. So when they come home and they are crabby and they haven't had sleep and had a bad call, like, how do you separate yourself as a spouse so you don't let it ruin your whole day or personalize it? We talk about sex and intimacy and the struggle to connect on that. And in that, there's, trying to plan to have children when you live in a first responder life. That's really difficult because you're only home certain days out of the week. You can't, plan it if you want to. And we talk about, gosh, there's so much here. We talk about how to argue healthy, and that's along the lines of communication. We talk about love languages. We talk about attachment styles. We, talk about how to sit with difficult things, the fear that comes with, being a spouse, the reality that death is something that happens. These are all things that we talk about in the group over 10 weeks. So it's a 10-week group. We meet once a week for an hour, and we go over basically all of that together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot. It is important. When I was a partner of a first responder, and granted, I'm not anymore, but that was one of the biggest things, was I felt like it was just so hard to find a group I felt like I was understood in. Like, I'd go on Facebook and I'd see firewives groups, and it's a bunch of wives complaining about how horrible the life is and their husband this and blah, blah, blah. And yes, there's room for that because there are difficult things in that culture. And we got to have room for that. In my group, there's room for that. But also, I felt like they were really missing out. No one was talking about the perks of being with a firefighter. Like, the fact that you get to stay in this honeymoon stage kind of for longer in your relationship because you're not with each other 24/7. The fact that you are allowing time to build up this desire to be with them or missing them, that's something normal 9-to-5 relationships do not have. The fact that there's like safety within that community and family within that community, those are huge perks. And one of the biggest things that I noticed, and I know I'm going to offend someone when I say this because it is offensive to some. I'm going to say it anyways. Identity. When I would go in these firewife groups, these wives took on that fire identity hardcore, like aggressively. Like the stickers, the hats, the everything firewife.
Oh yeah.
In my group, we talk a lot about identity, And as a spouse, how it is very, it's safe. It feels really safe to have the identity of a fire family because there's community and family in that. And it's, we're proud of our spouses that do that. But also, when we lose ourselves in someone else's identity, it puts you in a real funky spot. So when you lose yourself in the identity of being a mom or a wife or a fire wife, and you don't take the time to actually go, no, this is who I am to the core. These are the things that have created who I am. This is my character. If we don't take time to do that, what I see often is a lot of wives who lose their own identity and they live for their husband's thing, and they put their husband on a pedestal. And then I see a lot of really unequal relationship when it comes to communication and help around the house. And these women are the ones that are burnt out the most because they're not getting help because they put their husband on a pedestal. And
is that codependency? Would that be considered codependency?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. All of that is talked about in our group in a very gentle way as well.
Yeah. I knew nothing about codependency until I started going to counseling. And then I learned about codependency.
Now you know.
Yeah. So that's a real deal too. I mean, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And for anyone listening that doesn't know, what codependency is, it's basically when you are so dependent on the other person that it affects your mood and it affects what you do. You basically don't function as an individual. You function as a unit in a really unhealthy way, though.
Yeah. Functioning as a unit is important, but like you said, when it becomes unhealthy, that's where the problem comes in for codependency.
You got to be grounded in your own identity. So
sure.
I say a lot of those things with my wives in the group and also as individuals. I sit with a lot of wives that have been on the other side of infidelity. I sit with wives who really struggle with their husbands, who struggle with substance abuse. And I'm sure you've seen this before. It's on TikTok, Instagram. The quote that says, we go to therapy for the people in our lives who won't go.
Yep.
I sit with a lot of wives like that and help support them to navigate that life.
Substance abuse obviously is huge, marital issues. That's all a big issue with first responders. So I mean, all that stuff needs to be addressed,
Yes.
I'll speak to fire academies and police academies and or just anybody that I go out and talk to about mental health and touch on all those things, and try to bring it to light and say, hey, you need to have healthy avenues for the stressors that we deal with on a daily basis. And those are issues that need to be addressed, plus many other things. Yeah.
Oh, I love that you do that. That's so important. And that's one of the biggest things here. You had brought it up before we had started recording of the stigma of mental health for first responders.
100%.
And I think one of the biggest ways to quote unquote break the stigma, I know it's a thing now, but is to normalize and to talk about and to create conversation around, because a lot of these things that are creating a stigma are we don't talk about them. It's not socially or societally, it's not acceptable. We don't, we were just talking about that in my, my first responder partner group last night, actually. The wives, what were we talking about? We were talking about sex. Yeah. And intimacy. And one of the wives said, I'm so thankful for this group of strangers, right? People, we don't know each other. We're not all from the same department. She said, because these are things that I've been really wanting to talk about with someone, but these are not things you bring up at the Christmas party at your department table, right? Like, hey, so what do you guys do when, you're not able to connect intimately? That's not something that comes up. So to have little pockets of safe spaces where you can get in a group with a bunch of people you don't know and you don't have to share your last name if you don't want to.
Yep.
Or, for you to go and just talk about it, or for people to listen to a podcast and hear, oh yeah, I've dealt with that, but I don't know, I haven't had anyone to talk about it with. I get this a lot with men who struggle with pornography addiction and also infidelity along those lines. A lot of these men don't want to do video sessions, and that is fine with me. We do phone sessions. So pop my headphones on, they tell me, hey, I've never gone to therapy for this. I've never told anyone this, but it's eaten me alive. And I heard you talk about it on a podcast. And I know this is a safe place for me to talk about it. So we go through confidentiality. I let them know it's safe and confidential. No one can even ask if I see them as clients. And then we go into it and we start to change their life and the way that they think about these things and really pinpoint why they're struggling. So yeah, normalizing and talking about it is huge. It creates an avenue for people to come in and get help when they need it.
Yeah. And I think that's where the change is going to come in. It's just almost like you said, normalizing and showing, hey, it can happen to you. And if it does, there's avenues to get you help. Right. And
yes. Yeah.
You're not alone. You're not the only one that's dealt with it, and it runs the spectrum from pornography all the way to drug abuse to everything else. I promise you, there's somebody out there that has dealt with it. You're not alone.
Absolutely. And when I think of, high rates of suicide in this field, I think it's people that feel stuck. They feel stuck in it. They don't know where to turn. Or it feels so overwhelming that they just don't even know how to start with it. I will tell you, if you're listening to this and you're someone that is in that moment where you feel stuck in whatever category that is or what's going on in your life, the first step is to reach out. That is the first step. To Instagram message me. You don't even have to live in California. I'll find you a resource. I will help connect you. I will make the phone call for you. The first step is reaching out.
Yep. Once you do that and get on that road, man, it's not going to be easy. It wasn't for me, at least, but it changed my life. And I'm not saying that I have perfect days every day, because I don't. I mean, I'm still human. I still struggle with things, but knowing that I have the avenues to go get help when I do struggle is, man, it's priceless. Just knowing that I'm not the only one out there and that there are people out there willing to help us get through the things that we deal with as first responders.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to circle back around to children real quick too. The teenagers that I see or have seen, hypervigilance is actually contagious. I don't know if you knew this. When you tend to be the one that's hypervigilant and you come home, it's contagious to your wife and also your children. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I can speak from experience here as a daughter of a first responder. When I sit at restaurants, I don't like my back turned to the door. My dad has taught me to watch hands. I watch hands all the time because my dad has always told me you watch people's hands. I'm hypervigilant in that way. I don't like my back turned to people. I like to see what's going on in a room. And
that's me.
You too. And my dad as well. When I sit with my dad at restaurants, I automatically give him the seat where he can see everything. It's just our family culture, right? So I'm hypervigilant in that way. And so are a lot of children of first responders. And it's not a bad thing. Those are things that keep us safe.
Sure.
But they can also manifest in high functioning anxiety for a lot of children. Also fear. And I think that's another thing that's contagious, is if a wife or a spouse that's at home or, has a job, the one that's not a first responder, if they really struggle with anxiety and they're like, oh, I don't know when your dad's coming home. Like, oh, haven't heard from your dad. He's on a fire. And kind of like, maybe the wife is the kind of person that just like power cleans the house so that they can feel back in control. And I see this a lot with my spouses. That child is going to pick up on that and they're going to become very compulsive and also very anxious. And so I see a lot of children of first responders that really pick up on that energy and need someone to talk about it with.
Yeah. Is it more prominent? Does it go by like male, female, girl, boy, or is it just across the board?
It's across the board.
Across the board, same.
Yeah, across the board. I mean, I definitely see a correlation between like mother-daughter. I think that's definitely a very strong correlation there. We tend to learn as children by watching the people we identify the most with and how they function in life. So as daughters, we watch our moms. As sons, we watch our dads. But I mean, it could definitely go the other way too, especially because dad's not around a lot. So if it's just mom and you're a son, same thing. Pick up on all of those things.
Like I have 3 daughters.
Wow.
So that was probably one of the hardest parts for me, that and my wife, because I knew that vicarious part of it, passing off that to them was just, I know it affected them. I mean, there was just no way around it because I was home for, almost 4 months. off of work. So,
wow.
and then them having to not deal with me, but see me in that way, right, on a daily basis. I know it was a struggle for them, So, yeah, I mean, there definitely needs to be avenues there for your kids to be able to get help, your wife to be able to get help,
Mm.
and that's where I think a lot of fire departments, police departments, or just agencies in general, are lacking on that end of it, is having the right resources for families too. Sometimes it could be as simple as going to an EAP, but more than likely the EAP is not going to be the route to go for us, just from history, seeing what's happened in the past. But they need to have vetted counselors too, like you, and, to be able to go talk to and sit down that know how it is, So yeah, it's
Can I
very
give you
important.
yeah. Can I give you a behind the scenes kind of peek at why a lot of EAP counselors are not the best?
Let's do it. Yep. I haven't broke
Um,
that one yet, so I'm very interested in that.
okay. I'll tell you why I'm not an EAP counselor. And I guess that's probably in not all. So let me just take everyone out of the box or just stuck everyone in. So there are therapists and counselors who go through EAP that work with departments that are wonderful and amazing. And I'm sure
Sure.
people listening are like, wow, I've really connected with mine. Just as many in any career, right? There are going to be some really crappy counselors and therapists that work for EAP. A lot of times EAP does not pay well. That is one of the biggest reasons why I don't work for EAP, is they don't pay well. We go to school for a really long time to become a therapist. I'm in a crap ton of debt.
Yeah.
Right. I love helping people. It's not all about the money, but it is my
No.
job.
Yeah.
And so people that usually, not always, but a lot of the clinicians that have a hard time building a practice on their own or don't think that people will pay to see them will go through EAP. So that is maybe one of the things. That's why a lot of the colleagues that I work with that are really great at what they do, they don't take insurance, they don't go through EAP because they know their value and their worth, and people pay to see them.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the
I'm not
crap.
trashing EAP at all, but
No.
I mean, they have their place, and I believe that, right? But
Yeah.
more than likely, they're not going to be culturally competent like what you talk about and know
Yeah.
exactly what this, the stuff that we go through. There may be some great ones out there that are marriage counselors or, financial stuff that may be perfect, but
Yep.
I've heard a lot of bad stories about EAP. Not every one of them. There's been some that were, and I've heard stories about, counselors that we thought were vetted, and they wasn't a match. And that's not uncommon too, for you to go to a counselor that's not a match and,
Oh, you
have to switch over and go to another counselor, So
absolutely. There's not enough choices in that too. I think that's the difficult thing is usually you get, a couple people to choose from depending on what your department
yep.
looks like, how big it is.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it takes more than that to find a therapist that's a good fit. You're not just gonna, it's cool that if you do find a therapist that's a good fit right away, but it takes a while to find someone that and that's the biggest piece of therapy, is that you're with someone that you feel understands you, that you feel like can connect to you on the level where you're at.
Yep.
Also, I mean, and I want to circle back around to that too, the whole pay situation. Like, it's so unfortunate to me because that is the most needed area. And it's lacking the most when it comes to finances getting poured into it. And that it's frustrating really as a clinician and probably as a first responder too. And then also the other side is confidentiality. I know that EAP is confidential, but I do believe that a lot of departments keep kind of a record of who in their department comes and sees them. They have to in order to pay the clinician. So a lot of first responders, even if they know it's confidential, will not go through their EAP because they want it to be completely confidential. Especially when we're talking about other things, right? Like talking about sex and,
Sure.
addiction. These guys that just want to do phone calls, they don't want to be, it's confidential. So one of the biggest things for my practice is that, so I don't take insurance either, but before everyone cringes their nose at me, because I know there's those listening that are like, oh, her, like she charges a right arm and a left leg for therapy. And I do, because I know I'm good at what I do, but I also work with a nonprofit called the Overwatch Collective. Have you heard of them?
I have heard of them. Yep.
Okay, they're amazing. And anyone listening that's looking for financial resources, this is the way to go. And I'm sure there's other organizations too, but I'm contracted with this organization. It's a nonprofit that raises money for first responders, partners of first responders. You don't have to be married. You could be a
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend, and children of first responders to see me and a bunch of other clinicians for therapy. And what they do is they act as an insurance, basically. So they pay for your first 3 sessions in full. You can see
Yep.
a clinician for free for 3. After that, they pay 60% of 5, 50% of the next 5, 40% of the next 5, and it's a 10% tiered process every 5 sessions. So you're paying a pretty small copay like you would if your insurance covered it. And it's not free like EAP would be, but you're getting top-notch therapists who are culturally competent and a wide selection. So their goal is to get a clinician that's culturally competent in every single state. And right now they have a lot of that covered. There's tons in California. They have male and female. Some have been first responders.
I need
Some
to get a
are.
hold of them.
They're amazing. I love them. I'm personal friends with them. I was their first contracted therapist before they branched out to other states and other clinicians, and I'm honored to work with them. They also financially support my groups, so they will pay for half of the amount of group for
Mm-hmm.
any first responder partner that wants to join my group. So instead of $80 a session for therapy, you're only paying 40, and they upfront pay the rest.
See, that's kind of what FreeBurn originally got started for, is to try to,
Really?
we eventually want to get our nonprofit status and then be able to help people with counseling costs. So I would love to talk to them to see kind of how they do it. And I mean, obviously 2 is better than 1. So if we can get 2 of us out, I'm sure there's plenty more out there that are doing similar things, but that's
needed.
eventually what we would like to do is, get our nonprofit status and then be able to help pay for, because that was huge for me. Like I had a HSA account whenever I went through, and I didn't have no money in that HSA account. And I was having to basically pay out of pocket for all my counseling costs,
That's expensive.
It hit me hard, and that was a huge issue for me. And just having that stressor along with the regular stressors that I had, the money thing is just like, it's a real deal, so I know that is an area that needs to be looked at and taken care of and helped out at, is the counseling cost end of things. I mean, y'all have to get paid for what you do because you're professionals at what you do, and we understand that, but at the same time, it can get tough sometimes,
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, when you come to and I see this a lot with, the older firefighters or retired, when this isn't something that's been prioritized at all your whole entire life,
mm-hmm.
and now all of a sudden someone's asking you to pay right arm to do it, in your head you're like, well, can't I just work this out by myself? Like, do I really need to pay $190 to sit with someone for 50 minutes? I see a lot of people go back and forth with that.
Yeah.
And I want to offer this picture. It's my favorite picture of therapy. I actually have 2. So if we're in your house and I'm like, hey, Matt, you got some gnarly cobwebs up there. I mean,
Yep.
you live in your house, so you would know, right? You'd go,
Sure.
oh, yeah, definitely. Like, I've seen those cobwebs. I live in my house. I'm working on getting to them. Now, let's say you never, ever leave your house. You've never gone outside your house. You stay in your house. I go outside to your gutters and I'm like, hey, Matt, your gutters look like crap. I'm just tearing your house apart right now. Don't blame me. And then you come outside with me and you're like, whoa, I never realized my gutters look like crap, but that makes sense why I'm having, issues with this.
Yeah.
That's what therapy is. We all have blind spots. I don't care who you are. I'm a clinician. I see a therapist every other week because I've got blind spots. It is physically impossible for us to get outside of our own brains and look at our blind spots and know how they connect. And so that's a picture I like of therapy. The other
mm-hmm.
one is, I think of like a ball of yarn and lots of different colors, and it's tangled. And some people bring me this big fat ball of tangled yarn and they sit across from me with it in their lap. And my job is to take, the purple and the blue and start organizing them and then put them on the table for them. And so they can go, Oh, okay. That's how they're organized.
Yep.
My other picture is puzzle pieces. A lot of times I feel like people come into session, they dump a bunch of puzzle pieces on me. My job is to arrange the puzzle pieces and turn the puzzle around and say, hey, this is where this fits and this is why.
Yep.
These are things that we are enabled to do as humans. And I don't care how smart you are, how much self-help podcasts, books you've done. Those are all great things.
Yep.
It cannot get you out of your own head to see why things are connected. And that's what we're trained to do as clinicians. A good clinician will connect the dots for you.
Yeah. And when you're in your own head and you're going through this crap, it just amplifies it, in my opinion. I know it did for me. It's very hard to get out of your head whenever you're going through struggles like that. So it's invaluable for to have counseling. I think everybody should have to go to counseling. That's just me. I see the benefit in it now.
Yeah. I have my two big things that I think all first responders should do. All first responders should see a therapist at some point in their career, just as a check-in.
Yep.
All first responders should use a cold plunge. That's my other one.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So can you just touch on that? Like, what's the benefits behind it?
Yeah, I'm like in the cold plunge cult, so bear with me. I get real nerdy about it. I've done tons of research because I've been trying it. I've been doing it for about, I want to say like 2 or 3 months now. I've had my cold plunge. So personally, I've tried it, and then I'm like, okay, I need to look into the science around this because I can feel it, and it's amazing. So a few things that the cold plunge is great for. First, right off the bat, it's good for muscle soreness. Obviously that's a big one. It's ice. It's anti-inflammatory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, what it does is it shocks your nervous system. So it resets your entire nervous system, and it puts you in a balanced state of being afterwards. So for me, at least, and a lot of people I talk to, after you get out of that cold plunge and it's death when you're in there, I don't know one person that is excited to get in it. It's a bad time, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh man, you dread it. You get in, your toes feel like they're going to fall off. You get out, and the calm that you get when you get out is your nervous system resetting itself. And this is huge for first responders because that piece of hypervigilance or that piece of decompression that a lot of people say they're doing or they don't know how to do, your body is going to do it for you. There's no, fancy thing. You just get in, right? And your body naturally is going to reset itself. This can help with people that are really struggling with PTSD. People that are struggling with racing minds. I hear this a lot with my firefighters where they come home and they should be tired and their mind will not shut off. It's like if someone were to like slap you in the face and was like, hey, snap out of it. But it's a very deep level of that. It also resets your dopamine receptors. So that's a huge thing too. I think of this for people that struggle with any kind of addiction, substance abuse, pornography. Maybe you're on your phone a lot and you notice that you're just really like feeding for dopamine because you've had it and you're trying to check out of yourself mentally. That cold plunge resets all of your dopamine receptors for you. And what it does is it'll make you more sensitive to natural levels of dopamine, like sunshine and eating good food and being around people you love. Consistently will do that. It helps with your immune system. It also does something, this is more the nerdy side of things. There's something that scientists were able to find called brown fat. They thought that only children and babies had brown fat, but it turns out that adults can also get brown fat, and brown fat is a good thing. What it does is it speeds your metabolism up, and it helps ward off diseases. So they did a study, and I listened to the Andrew Huberman podcast religiously.
Me too.
He's great. And I listened to his podcast. It's very long, but it's good on this. Specifically, he was talking about this study they did with people that were elderly and people that did the cold plunge for lots of years. They had more brown fat and less disease versus people who did not.
Really?
And it also can help your body relax. So because you're going in such a heightened state of stress, when you're inside the cold plunge, it's good stress, just like exercise. When you get out, you're going to get all the calm, like peace feelings that come from getting outside of a situation like that. So this can be good for someone who's coming off of a shift, get right in that cold plunge, and then be able to decompress with their family and be relaxed. Yeah, there's probably even more than that. So it speeds up your metabolism. It can help with weight loss. It can help with sleep. It helps with your circadian rhythm. I get in mine every morning at 6, between 6 and 6:20 a.m. That's just what I do. And you don't have to have it super cold. You don't have to stay in there forever. A common misconception of cold plunging is people think they want to stay in it for as long as possible. And they have this like challenge mindset, like, I'm going to get in for 10 minutes this time.
Yeah.
That defeats the purpose. It's supposed to be a stimulant. So if it's not cold enough where you can't be in there for longer than 3 minutes, it's not cold enough.
Yeah.
And also it depends on you and what's cold enough for you. But most people around like 50 degrees is plenty. You don't have to go down to 40 degrees to get the cold plunge effect. You can even do this up to 55 or 60, depending on your body type. If you're male or female, males typically run warmer than females do.
Yeah.
And so for me, I get in mine for 3 minutes at 50 degrees. And I do that just during the days that Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't do it on the weekends. Sometimes I do. It really depends.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are huge. I just nerded out on you. Are you good?
I'm gonna try it now. You talked me into it.
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet. I've been seeing a whole lot of, like, I have friends that do it, obviously, but and some of them are firemen, some of them are not, and they've told me, hey man, it's legit, you know. So
Yeah.
and I've heard several people talk about it, so just haven't done it yet. So I'm gonna have to try it and do it.
Do it. It's different than a cold shower. And the people I've been talking to on podcasts about this, really cool. They've gotten their departments to fund one. So they'll get one at the station, and they'll all use it. I've gotten videos of, stations using them.
Yep. I've seen a bunch of those videos. Yeah.
Yeah. I have it on my page too. Also I have a discount link. The one that I got was like $115 or something, maybe less. It's really not that expensive. And I have a code that saves whoever uses it I think it's like $10-15. So
where do they find that code at?
So on my Instagram, I have a highlight under there called Cold Plunge.
Yep.
And it's in there, but you can also just message me. I'll send you over that code. It'll save you a few bucks.
Awesome.
The most expensive part is the ice.
Yep.
But if you're using it, periodically, it's fine. If you're using it every day, I would recommend getting the chiller, which is what I have. It keeps your water regulated at a certain temperature. Mine's at 50, and it's very economically safe. So it's not going to run up your electricity bills. It's like a refrigerator, basically.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. I love mine. I told you I'm in the cult. It's made me, I feel, it really honestly regulates me a lot of times. I've gone in there super anxious some days, and I get out of there feeling really calm. And I've never had anything that's been able to do it that quickly. And a lot of my first responders go to alcohol for that reason. But what if we were able to switch out alcohol for cold plunging? I mean, that's what
amazing. I'm saying, man. I mean, anything that's a positive is got to be good. So
yeah, definitely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we touched on a bunch of good stuff today, and we could probably go on for hours, I'm sure, but if you wanted to add one thing to the spouses, a piece of advice, what would you think the most important piece of advice would be from a counseling aspect?
Okay, this is going to sound so like no brainer and cheesy, but it's really that important. Communication is huge, giant, huge. The less we communicate about things, the more that there's going to be resentment that builds up, and it's going to get swept under the rug. I see this a lot with first responder partners, where because your partner is gone and you don't get a chance to maybe continue the conversation, it gets swept under the rug, or maybe even you don't want to bring up those things when you only have a few days out of your R&R to actually connect, have sex, have normal conversation about the kids in the house, fix things around the house. Like, how are you supposed to do all of that in a couple of days? A lot of my first responders partners will say, you know what, there was something that bothered me, but I chose not to bring it up because I wanted to keep the peace for 2 days.
Yeah.
When we don't communicate it becomes resentment. And the more resentment builds, they become cinder blocks. And when they become cinder blocks and they're completely hardened concrete, we got to knock down tons of concrete to get to the core where there's no more resentment. And that's a lot of work. I see a lot of couples who have these cinder blocks built up to the sky, and it's a lot of work to tear them down to get to a place where they can connect again. If we were to stop that process and actually communicate about the things that are coming up for us, and this goes both ways for the first responder and also the spouse, we could really do a lot. Yeah, we would basically like mitigate the damage that was going to happen.
Yeah. Very important to communicate. I've been married for, I don't want to get this wrong, fixing to be 28 years.
Oh, wow.
At the end of the month. Yeah.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
And hey man, it's been rough. It's been great. It's been everything above, right? But got an awesome wife. It was my high school sweetheart. And man, and I've said it on probably dang near every podcast. If it wouldn't have been for her and the Lord above, I don't know where I would be. She's my rock, and without her, I don't know, it'd be tough,
I love that.
So yeah, very important to communicate. I know how that is. You can't just shut down and hold stuff in. You can. It's not going to do you any good. It's going to eat you up eventually. So yeah, talk to your wives, talk to your spouses, get that stuff off of it and just work through your issues, man. Destiny, thank you very much for coming on. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And maybe we can have you back on later on. We'll discuss further things. And I'll tell you about my ice plunges then.
I can't wait for the update. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm going to try it and see. Yeah, very interested in doing that and see. I could use it for sure. If it's going to help me, heck yeah, I'm in. I'm going to try it. Yeah. Try it out. Let me know. Yeah. Well, every podcast, I always say, if there's somebody out there that's struggling or, you're having issues with suicidal thoughts or suicide ideation, any kind of struggle, 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline. Call that lifeline. If you feel like you can't reach out to them, reach out to us. freeburn2023@gmail.com. I'll put a link to Destiny's Instagram. There's resources out there, folks. Don't be afraid to step up and just say, hey, I'm struggling. I need help. It could be confidential, and it will be. It's out there. We can get past this. We'll continue burning that stigma one podcast at a time on this side. So thank you, Destiny, for coming on and sharing all the valuable information, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Me too. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good day. Thanks for tuning in to the Freeburn 2023 podcast. If you or somebody you know is in crisis, reach out to the Suicide Crisis Lifeline at 988. Or if you're looking for counseling resources, contact us at freeburn2023@gmail.com. We'll do our best to get you to where you need to be. Let's keep burning that stigma, one podcast at a time.